how can we optimize our energy, be at peak energy. But if you're just trying to get yourself high all the time, you're going to actually suffer from burnout.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, a lot of people are
understanding the
dealing with that.
energy of the seasons is very important so that we can honor it. And, it's not like in the winter, oh, we hibernate, we don't do anything, but the energy of the winter is a very deep energy. And we know
Mm,
this from Chinese traditional medicine. There is a depth to it. It happens all around us in nature. All the energy of the trees and any plant is just going down to their roots. So all that energy is still
hmm.
there. And then for us, how does that reflect?
This is Health Unfiltered, the podcast where we cut through the bullshit and get honest about fitness, nutrition, and mental wellness.
Today's guest is Ruben Gomez. He's the founder of the seasonal movement. His journey began with a personal struggle against seasonal affective disorder and the constant pressure to perform year round, even when his body and mind were clearly asking for something different. That experience led him to explore deep connection between human biology, the environment, and the rhythms of the season. Today, he helps entrepreneurs and high performers align their routines with the natural flow of the year so they feel better, think more clearly, and create lasting success without burnout. His work blends neuroscience, coaching, and seasonal wisdom to help people thrive by working with their biology rather than against it. At his core, he's committed to raising the frequency of humanity, one mind, one season at a time.
I'm originally from Venezuela. I travel throughout the US and the world, but I never went to the Midwest for a tourist visit during winter, right? Like you don't tend to do
Hmm.
that. And when I moved to the Midwest, I was 21 years old. That was over 10 years ago. And, it was fine at the beginning. I was going to school and life was fun. And about 5 years into it, I started just struggling. And I still remember, like if it was yesterday, I can see the whole picture of my mid-century modern house, windows floor to ceiling. And I was looking at the outside and it was like a movie constantly repeating itself. It was February. It was cold, wet, windy,
Mm.
cloudy, and for about 2 weeks, the movie was repeating itself. I would wake up, I would stay in bed. I finally get out of bed around 9:30, kind of get a little breakfast, go to work. I'm an entrepreneur, so I work from home. I had a home office, I would work. And about 3 hours into it, I couldn't like hold on the anxiety, like I was confused and I'm like, I'm done. So I would stop working and I would spend my afternoon kind of like perhaps sleeping or trying, just thinking. And then my wife would come from home, we'll eat dinner, we'll go to sleep, and then I couldn't sleep. I
Yeah.
would just be wiring bed. And that kept repeating itself. So I tell my wife about 2 weeks into it, it's like, I'm feeling this way. Like, I don't know what's happening. This is so new to me. I'm a go-getter, entrepreneur, building my business, and I never struggle with this weird kind of energy or this like mental health thing. Like, I was confused, and she's
Mm.
like, honey, you just have the winter blues.
Yeah.
And that rocked my world because I had no idea. I had no idea that the environment, the weather has something to do with the way we feel. I grew up in Venezuela when it's tropical, same weather all year round. I mean,
Yeah.
the difference will be, 10 degrees here and there, maybe a little bit
Mm.
of rain here and there, but very constant. And then the Midwest has very drastic 4 seasons. Nobody told me this is what you experience, this is how you feel, this is how life changes. Like the rhythm of life truly changes, like your movement. You don't go outside as much. There is not that much socialization happening. Your hormones, your neurotransmitters, it all changes.
Hmm.
And, back forward into today, I'm very passionate about the seasons. And the reason being is because from epigenetics, we know that our genes our genes plus the environment is who we are right now. It's our phenotype. Now, what is so interesting about it is like your genes are the same, they just turn on and off depending of the environment. and the environment is constantly changing. That's what I find interesting. The environment is fluctuating, and with that, our gene expression does. So the way we
Mm.
feel is very related to the environment, and that's what has been my obsession. That's what I'm creating the seasonal movement to help people understand how their environment affects their hormones, neurotransmitters, and the way they feel, think, and behave, so that we can start acting consciously, so that we can consciously choose what do we want to do to create what I call the flow state, to be healthy, to be under the flow, to achieve more with less effort every single season of the year, because a lot of people struggle with seasonality, the winter blues. Some people go hypomaniatic in the summertime. Like basically all it means is that we might be a little higher than we should.
Yeah.
And when we become conscious now, that's when the door opens, and that's when we can
Mm.
start creating routines that are in alignment with the environment, and we can get in the flow. And that's when things get fun. That's what I'm here for, to guide people in that direction, how to create routines that are good for them. From epigenetics, I got also, I'm very proud to say that we have associations with apps and technology. We can leverage technology to help people understand who they are, because that's the thing, is that all this advice going on social media about perhaps the grind, or perhaps waking up early and get things done, and that works for a segment of the population,
Hmm.
but it doesn't work for everybody. There is some people that don't react and bounce back from early morning stress as good as others, and it can create injuries. It actually puts people in a fight or flight mode throughout the morning and throughout the day, and that's basically chronic stress.
Oh yeah.
And because of the tools that we now have, we can allow people to understand who they are, and then create a routine that is in alignment with the environment right now. It's like, where are you
Hmm.
at? Where's your geographic location, your time of the year? You can create a routine that aligns with the lighting patterns, the social dynamics, and
Hmm.
essentially create like the chemistry of your own body. We want to have the right amount of chemicals like cortisol, like serotonin, like dopamine, like oxytocin, like
Hmm.
things that we know are healthy. So how we do that? By behaviors, and by aligning those behaviors with the natural rhythms, the lighting patterns, for example.
Yeah.
um, so where I live, it gets dark in the winter time around 5, and in the summertime it gets dark around 9:30. And by going through just very simple exercises or looking at that lighting pattern, I realized, wow, the whole season thing is not about temperature. Because that's what you think, right? Oh, it gets cold. But the lighting is like the number one cue for our circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
And where I live, the summer day is 1.5 times longer from a daylight perspective. Like the daylight is 1.5 longer than in the winter time.
Wow, it's a big
Now you tell me
difference.
if that's not going to have an effect on you, right? And the norther you go, or the farther south you go, the drastic that is. Like everybody in Canada has even more drastic um,
Hmm.
lighting cycles throughout the year. So nobody told me, "Hey, kid, this is how you will feel. Like this is normal. This is what happens. This is how people live during this time of the year." So I was just ignorant and living my own thing, and I was just failing to adapt to it. So I want to be that person for that person, for me 10 years ago, that
Hmm.
perhaps might be an entrepreneur, perhaps might be actually an immigrant just like me, perhaps might be a professional, and might be realizing that something's off. So
Yeah.
I want to bring that guide and that pattern, because there is patterns. That's the beauty of it. It's like when we start studying this, we realize this is a cycle. It repeats itself year after year. So when
Hmm.
you figure it out, that pattern, then you just have to figure it out for a year. Then you can kind of copy and paste. And that's what I like to call the flow, like entering into that yearly flow. It's kind of like the image of the yin yang. You know how the
Hmm.
yin yang has this little curvature to it.
Yep.
And in the winter time, the yin energy is at the highest, and that line might start a little low. That's perhaps our energy, like naturally, like that's where we are. And as we move throughout the year, that goes up, and then perhaps we're in the summer in the peak, right? For me, that might be like August, and
Hmm.
then it starts going down. So entering into that energy and also understanding that, because one thing is to manipulate our energy levels by our behaviors, by the way we eat, by our supplements. And I bring a lot of that into it, into how can we optimize our energy, be at peak energy. But if you're just trying to get yourself high all the time, you're going to actually suffer from burnout.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. A lot of people are
understanding the
dealing with that.
energy of the seasons is very important so that we can honor it. And, it's not like in the winter, oh, we hibernate, we don't do anything, but the energy of the winter is a very deep energy. And we know
Mm,
this from Chinese traditional medicine. There is a depth to it. It happens all around us in nature. All the energy of the trees and any plant is just going down to their roots. So all that energy is still
hmm.
there, and then for us, how does that reflect? It's a great time for introspection. It's a great time to realignment. It's a great time for planning. Like if you look at your whole year, like, am I going the right direction? Or, the strategy of the business, or how are my finances doing? Like doing those kind of projections so that when the spring arises, like every year, it comes with that energy. Like
You'll be
everything's just
ready
coming
for
out
it.
the ground. And
Yeah.
again, you make an adjustment in your routine. When do we do that? We do that in the daylight savings time. I
Hmm.
mean, I think we can all relate to feeling druggy a little bit and feeling down for the count. That hour gets taken away from us in the springtime every single year. And it's actually a health concern issue. Like it leads to strokes, it leads to cardiovascular diseases. So it has an effect in the way that people live their lives. So what we want to do is that if we know that we're entering into the spring energy, things, the day, essentially the afternoon is getting very long. In
Hmm.
the month of March, where I live, we gained 75 minutes in the afternoon. And
Wow.
then you keep in consideration that daylight savings time, and you have to realize that there is some changes happening unconsciously that I don't even realize. Like, we have to agree that we don't know it all. We have to agree that there is something happening there. So let's look into it. So that's where the idea of seasonal routines come in place,
Hmm.
so that we can be in alignment with our circadian rhythm. Because remember, the shift in an afternoon, 75 minutes, is significant from a biological perspective. We might
Yeah,
want to
that's a
stuck
lot.
to our clock, right, or watch, and just like, hey, I go to sleep at the same time all year round. But in reality,
Hmm.
our biology sees those cues, sees the lighting cues, and there are many, by the way, but I'm just going to keep it simple. And then it adjusts to the lighting. It doesn't adjust to the watch. It doesn't adjust to our societal clock. So what we want to
Yeah.
have is a routine that is in alignment with our biology. And
Hmm.
again, it might mean a few adjustments here or there. So I'd like to call myself the seasonal expert, because there's like little tricks that we can, after being doing this for a decade, there is some, shortcuts, and I bring
Yeah.
that in. It's kind of like the art, like the art of the deal instead of the science, perhaps. But there is a
Right.
combination of science. This is all scientifically based, but then bringing that piece of art to it to allow people to transition in a smoother, more efficient way, and again in alignment with the season. But what is your purpose? Let's make sure we're heading in that direction. So this is a
Yeah.
great time in the spring when you're in alignment. Things are about to start, taking shape. So let's take advantage
Hmm.
of that energy and achieve as much as we want to.
That's a great time for us to have this discussion. And I kind of want to take a step back. You mentioned that your wife said you had the wintertime blues. And I think that's the official term or more commonly known as seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I think
I
about 5% of people in the United States deal with that regularly.
It's a lot more, that's the thing. It's like I'm not one of that 5%, but I experienced it. Like I didn't went to a doctor and got medicated or
Yeah,
got,
I think it's
um,
5% that are clinically diagnosed, but then there's a bigger percentage that just kind of deal with it or don't
Yeah.
really know what's going on and just kind of try to tough it out.
Yeah, so I every time I go and do a keynote speak, I ask, who here has feel the winter blues?
Hmm.
Everybody, I say like 80% of the room raises their hand, and then, who
Yeah.
has know somebody, 100% participation. And when you bring in the seasonal affective disorder, maybe 50% will have raised their hand, right?
Hmm.
The thing with the winter blues is that it has become accepted. It's just part of life. That's what it is. And I'm trying to challenge that because it's not really. That is, conscious thinking dictating who you are, perhaps. And you actually do have a choice. It might not be that you will be living a summer-like life in the winter. No, there's beauty in the
Mm.
winter as well, but it doesn't have to be miserable or slow or depressive because that's really what's happening. What's happening is that we're spending a lot more time indoors. We
Hmm.
are our survival instincts kick in, and let's save some energy, like literally, like our primal brain is here to make us survive, and it's clicking, it's sending signals, and we don't want to go outside because it's dangerous. Perhaps there is a danger preservation instinct within us. On top of that, preserving energy, and on top of that, reproducing, that is genetically input in the human being so that the human race survive. And all of them happen
Hmm.
indoors in the wintertime. So
Yeah, and
the
definitely
way
you
we
can't
move,
fight it. You got to go with
you
the
can't
flow.
fight it. You just got to understand it though. And that's the key is how can we make something unconscious conscious?
Hmm.
And people tend to fight that. A lot of people struggle with, man, I just hate the winter because I go to sleep so early. It's like, well, give me a reason why, you don't like sleeping. No, well, I want to achieve more, but I feel like I have a lack of energy. Okay, do you realize that you perhaps are going to sleep at the same time compared with the sunset? Because that's what matters is
Hmm.
that the sunset where I live, like I said, 5 o'clock, sunset goes down. Well, by 9 o'clock, there has already been 3, 4 hours of melatonin production. So we want to
Yeah.
understand our neurochemicals, and is that that's about what an average adult needs to feel sleepy
Hmm.
and go to sleep. Now, there is
Um,
circadian rhythm disruption that happens due to blue light and due to electromagnetic frequencies. We can go there if you want, but that will essentially tap into why maybe some people don't go to sleep after 3 or 4 hours. But our
they're on their phone
natural
or watching TV or
tendency
something.
is to feel sleepy, when it gets dark. You take people to camping, and usually everybody goes to sleep around the same time. They get on a natural rhythm. Now,
Hmm.
in the summertime, going to sleep by 10, like I said, in the winter, it sounds natural, maybe even 9. No big deal. But in the summertime, if it's 10 p.m., you most likely are still wired. Like you most likely are not ready to go to sleep because
Yeah,
sun is still out there.
it's not
And
natural.
that's what people perhaps loves, that they have more energy. But what they don't realize is that all you're doing is adding time in the afternoon and then removing time for the morning. Because what we
Hmm.
can probably agree here is that an average human being needs about 8 hours of sleep, whether it's a little more or less. We gotta
Yeah.
go through 5 cycles, like it's just an average, right? It's general, but about 8 hours has been proved the ideal time to go to sleep. So in the summertime, you choose sleep 8 hours. In the wintertime, you choose sleep 8 hours. But what the
Hmm.
difference will be that if you go to sleep in the wintertime, perhaps at 9, now you're waking up at perhaps 5 in the morning. And
Hmm.
then in the summer, you go to sleep by 11, you perhaps are waking up at, I don't know, 7 o'clock.
Yeah,
So it's playing with that routine and have an understanding and accepting and knowing that you're
definitely.
doing it because that's what's good for your biology. That's what's good for you. So there is a mindset to it that we have to work on. And then again, I think a lot makes a lot of sense when you start looking at what's happening inside from a scientific
Hmm.
perspective. Most people, oh, that makes sense, right? It's just becoming aware. Like that's like the first
Yeah.
step.
Yeah, we spoke a few weeks ago, and between now and then we had the time change, and I hate daylight savings time. It always messes me up every year, but this year I actually did something different. I adjusted my sleeping time, my bedtime an hour later. so that
Oh, you did
it's
it.
still more in line with the natural cycle, the light cycle. And I think it helped a lot. It really helped me
Awareness.
overcome that time change. Yeah.
Awareness. That
Just that
catalyzed
little
the
shift.
action. And in reality, when you actually have that flexibility, nothing changed.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. You just go to
It's
sleep
just the
1 hour
time.
later or 1 hour earlier, and you just wake up an hour earlier. You are
Hmm.
still in sync with your biology.
Yeah. Yeah. And going to sleep at the same time and waking up at the same time every day, I think has a big impact on your overall health, keeping that rhythm.
But okay, so you just mentioned that, and that's what most literature will say, go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same
Hmm.
time. You actually went to sleep 1 hour later, right? Or 1 hour earlier. So the point here is that when we're talking the same time, are we talking, the sunlight, like the natural time, or are we talking the
Yeah,
watts? That's what I bring to the
exactly.
equation. And I think
Hmm.
the best way to measure that is by saying about the same time in relation to the sunset.
So the day, yeah, the
To the
daytime.
sunset, because again, the fluctuation is so dramatic the farther north you go, that you do want to adjust, and is in
Hmm.
relation to the sunset. That I think is
Yeah,
the key, and that is what
definitely.
is not being said on the general advice of sleep at the same time. So I want to acknowledge that maybe we're talking about the same, but by using different words,
The
it can
same
get
time
people
of day,
confused.
not the same time on the clock. Yeah, I think a
Correct.
lot of people struggle with that. They say they look at their watch, oh, it's 12, it's lunchtime. I gotta eat lunch now. But if you're not hungry, you don't need to eat lunch at that time. You need to like listen to your
Correct.
body and eat when you're hungry.
So we get into pre-bed routines and how to hack that so that you can actually achieve efficient and quality sleep instead
Hmm.
of being wired. And we talk about the lighting, also food intake, like when is the last meal you have, like all that has a dramatic impact. But what I wanna bring to awareness is that the 5 a.m. club perhaps, or like everybody wake up early and you're a go-getter, and you achieve more than the average person by the time they wake up. That's how you're successful. That kind of mentality, right?
Yeah.
I know based on epigenetics and based on phenotypes and based on the study that I do through the seasonal movement, that works well for a segment of people. That actually works very well for me, but I know that doesn't work well for everybody.
Yeah.
And what I want to bring to awareness is that if you're going to sleep in the summer by let's say 11, and you want to keep
Hmm.
it within a good range. That's what I say, between 2 and 4 hours after the sunset, is because that 2 hour might be on the summer and then the 4 hour might be on the winter. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
So that you don't go
definitely.
to
You
sleep
wanna
that late, perhaps, and you don't go to sleep that early in the winter time. So what I want to bring to awareness is that in the winter time, somebody go to sleep at 9 or 10, they wake up at perhaps 4 or 5. Actually, they slept their 8 hours, and you have a little gap there, right? Like
Mhm.
most people don't start working at 5 a.m., even though, it's a great time to think. But that's a great time also to perhaps for some people, for not for everybody, for some people to go to the gym.
Mhm.
Now, when it's summertime, and I'm just gonna bring it back actually to this moment right now. You mentioned you just lift this morning.
Yep.
You work out. You mentioned exercise, and in the winter, somebody where I live might go to work out at 5 in the morning in the winter time. But as we progress into springtime, like literally right now, like I just mentioned, March, we gain about 75 minutes of daylight. Most
Mhm.
of that is in the afternoon because of daylight savings time, but still, you're going to sleep later. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You're going to sleep later. So to sleep the 8 hours, you have to wake up later.
Right.
So what happens in somebody's mind when they are no longer going to the gym in the morning and they are perhaps trying to but struggling with? So are they gonna take an hour of their sleep because they don't know the importance of sleeping, right?
Mm.
Like I did that. I did that maybe 7 years ago. It's like, well, this routine works. I'm in the winter, I'm killing it, and I'm waking up at 5, going to a gym, meeting my guys, and I'm feeling great. Spring kicks in, all of a sudden I started missing the gym days because I just
Mm.
felt tired. I wasn't able to go to sleep as early. And then sometimes I will go, but I will sleep less. And
Yeah.
that catches up with you, right? So what end up happening is that that morning routine just goes away. You just drop it. And then there's a
Mm-hmm.
psychological battle happening where you are like, I'm not good enough, or like, I don't have the willpower, I'm not committed. That whole thing start happening. That's the first thing that happens.
Yeah.
So what I propose is that by being aware of that, all you gotta do is just to shift your morning exercise to the afternoon or a little later. It depends how much flexibility you have. But for most people that go to work perhaps at 7 or at 8, well, they just wake up a little later, they get ready, and they go to work. And then once they get
Mm-hmm.
out of work, then they have a longer afternoon. We gotta realize that the afternoon is longer. So it's still a good time to go work out in the afternoon, in the springtime and summertime. So it's being conscious about those
Mm-hmm.
changes that actually happen without us realizing. And the worst
Yeah.
thing is, what is worse? The person that commits to that same routine and pushes through it with willpower and just basically burn themselves down gradually over time. Because we know that a lack of sleep or being in misalignment with your circadian rhythm leads towards chronic disease.
Yeah.
It leads towards lower performance. When
Mm-hmm.
you align yourself with your rhythms, you're going to perform higher in everything: relationships, work, hobbies, physical activity, in every area of your life. You're going to feel better. But the person that sticks to that 5 in the morning routine all year round, just a question that I have: what is worse? The person that dropped the routine might feel bad about it. I'm not good enough. They might even don't work more because they realize they didn't move it. They just
Mm-hmm.
stop. Or the person that is doing it, but slowly but surely, getting into that chronic disease kind of environment. You know what I mean? Like forcing
Yeah.
themselves. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's incredible how important sleep is. I mean, we've done entire episodes on sleep in the past, and it's just so critical. Sometimes, well, most of the time I say that mental health is the most important aspect of overall health, but really lately I've been coming to realize that sleep might be even more important, because it has such a big effect on your mental health and your physical health as well. How do seasons and our environment influence our biology through circadian rhythms and epigenetics?
Okay, let's just start with epigenetics, and we're gonna get to the seasons towards the end. Essentially, epigenetics, as we already said, genetics is what we're born with, and
Like
then
our
the
DNA.
environment is what activates or deactivates our genes. So our
Hmm.
genes are perhaps always the same, but then it's like a switch. They turn on and off, and some genes turn on and off very quickly. Like if you get cold and you start shaking, there is some gene activation happening, but once you shut it off, it goes away. The
Yeah.
same happens with perhaps many other areas, but there are longer activating genes, like the way that we develop in the womb is an example, like our height. You know,
Mm.
our height is highly related to gene activation, and is highly related to certain environmental conditions, and more precisely to the hormones that we were in contact the most, or we got more influence with when we were in the womb. That
Wow.
influence certain layers in our body that perhaps made us grow taller, like the length of our femur is
Hmm.
highly related to there are studies that prove it's highly related to reproductory hormones that we were exposed in the womb.
Hmm.
So it's just to prove that the environment, and what I want to clarify the environment. When we say the environment from an epigenetic standpoint, we're not talking about the weather.
Yeah.
The environment is everything.
Hmm.
I even include the environment is even your own body when you look at the environment of your brain, perhaps. 'Cause, every hormone you're producing is because your brain is sending the signal, but your body's the one receiving it. So perhaps
Hmm.
you eat something, so nutrition is perhaps part of the environment.
Yeah, definitely.
Exercise, the way you move, that's perhaps part of the environment. Social dynamics. So social dynamics
Mm.
are part of the environment, experiences, levels of stress, how you grew up and the people you're around. And then, of course, the obvious are the exterior environment and then the interior environment. And I'm pretty sure I'm missing a few of them, but what I want to say is like it's everything. It's not just the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And how that relates to who you are is that it's activating or deactivating your gene expression. So there are experiments with twins that they got separated and they were identical twins, and and then they end up being very different people. That's how we know
Mm-hmm.
that the environment influences our genes and make us who we are right now. The beauty of it is that we are not doomed. The beauty of it
Mm-hmm.
is that we can still influence those genes by being conscious about the environment. Because we're not going to be able to perhaps change our genes, but we
Yeah.
can be selective about the environment that we choose to hang out with, where we are, the way that we move, the way that we, eat. And that will have an effect in who we are. So who we are is constantly changing based on the
Mm-hmm.
environmental choices that we are creating. Now, the way that the seasons come in play and the way that I'm relatively obsessed with the seasons, you can call it, is because through my experience, through going through seasonal affective disorder, the winter blues, and going through
Mm-hmm.
this journey of figuring it out, like what's going on, like going from not
Yeah.
knowing anything to now I want to be called the seasonal expert, like that's what I want my title to be, is because the environment is constantly changing and we call them seasons. We
Mm-hmm.
have recognized a pattern of the environmental changes happening. And that's how then we can realize, wow, there is these certain patterns happening in the environment during this specific season, during this time of the year, in my specific geographic location. So it makes sense to pay attention to them to be able to leverage them.
Yeah, that's so powerful to be able to have an effect on the way that your genes are expressed through what you do
Because what we
and
do
how
in the
you.
winter doesn't work in the summer. And it's because the
Hmm.
environment has completely changed.
Oh yeah.
And the more I look into it, the more I realize it's not just the temperature, the lighting, the obvious ones, but social dynamics. They
Mm.
follow patterns.
Hmm.
We can all relate in the US. It gets kind of hectic in the fall. If you have a family, if you're going to, maybe Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, like that time of the year is very unique compared to perhaps January, February, and March. There is a
Yeah.
uniqueness to it. Everybody's a little different, but in general terms, when you get up to the Midwest and above, the winters tend to be a lot more solitude in a solitude perspective compared to the fall. So that's why it's important to understand that because the environment changes, your genetic expression changes, whether you
Mm.
choose it or not. So what I bring to the equation is like, hey, let's choose. If being in connection with others is positive because we produce oxytocin,
Hmm.
then this time of the year we're more prone to isolate and not get that benefit. So why don't we just put a little weekly reminder? We are intentional about perhaps it's going for a date night, perhaps it's going to your parents' house, perhaps it's doing a Skype call. And it's so that you can get that neurotransmitter, that hormone that is positive. Because the idea is to be in a positive place in the flow all year round. And in comparison to the fall, perhaps, especially for a lot of like I'm an introverted, and when I'm around a lot of people for a lot of time, I need my time for myself. Like I truly need
Yep.
to just decompress, and I know that perhaps 50% of the population is within those lines as well. So
Hmm.
when we can realize, wow, like these next 3 months are gonna be packed, then that weekly date is with yourself. That weekly date is like this time of the week, every time, every day, every week, I'm gonna allow myself to rest. I'm gonna allow myself to, if I want to watch a movie, I watch a movie. If I want to go for a walk, whatever I need, because
Hmm.
during this time we tend to be on stress. When we are around people, it's alert. We gotta be alert. There is a lot of chemicals happening, especially like Christmas. Like
Yeah.
dopamine, serotonin, stress, like somebody's gonna open the gift. There's all this excitement. It's like literally like a hormonal party happening in steroids, right?
Hmm.
So recognizing those things also make me wonder, Wow, is that why so many people fall off the cliff after the holidays? Like, think about it. January, February, everybody's just going crazy with the winter blues because, yeah, the environment is pretty bad. But what about that misservice that we did to ourselves during the previous 3 months? We ate bad, very bad.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I'm talking about. Halloween candy, overeating and perhaps drinking, football and Christmas, and then it's over, and nutritionally wise, you're in a bad, you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
Then you went way above the social scale. Now you're born out, literally. And then it happens to be that it's a time of the year where you have a lot more time for yourself. You
Hmm.
have, that like we were talking earlier, that depthness of the winter that, kind of sends you inwards to start analyzing your life. And if you're in a bad spot, you see, it seems like all the conditions are leading towards, feeling seasonal affective disorder, a little bit of depression, anxiety. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why, mental health is kind of becoming an increasing and is trending upwards. Is just growing by the day, right? So it's just super interesting when you look at the seasons, not just from a weather perspective, but from an overall impact on your well-being. And that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, these things have a huge impact on people. I mean, what are some signs that someone is out of alignment with the seasons, the seasonal rhythm, and how can they begin to realign themselves?
What I realize is that this is a long-term gain. Like you do feel the impact immediately, but you have to be self-aware. And most
Hmm.
people are not. They just feel off and they're like, well, that's just what life is. Let me just keep pushing. I burned out twice and I had to take long breaks. I started a business and I was essentially living a summer-like pace for about 4 years. And the thing is like when the seasons come, they naturally slow you down. Like the people's mentalities and rhythms change, and you might try to be chasing and going hard, and things just slow down naturally, at least where I live, right? And when you don't
Yeah.
realize that you're working a lot harder than you need to, and that leads towards a burnout. So if you are noticing going up and down constantly,
Hmm.
everybody's a little different. What I notice is that the longer you go in this pattern, the more frequent those ups and downs are. You are more unstable, perhaps. Like you are more susceptible to a nice shiny day, and then you get excited and you get full of energy and you get super positive, and you go for a workout, and then all of a sudden, like again, spring is a four season, tomorrow might be winter here, and today is summer. And tomorrow might hit you like a rock. And then, it's cloudy, it's cold. So it's like a roller coaster, perhaps. So the more you're into it, the more misaligned you are, the more frequent those ups and downs are. But what I tend to, is just to make people aware is that do you notice a little bit of a pattern where it's easy to see the winter? The winter, everybody sees it. You're a little more time in the couch that you want to. You stop perhaps doing the workout and you look down on that, right? Because there's like low productivity. That's pretty normal in today's society. But start paying attention to your summers too. And also have the same um, like in the winter, you're going down. So you look at that and you say, okay, this is way out of whack. This is, way too
Hmm.
low. Just look at the summer the same way. Are you going too high? Are you going way too high? Look at
Yeah.
that. Because my theory is that you can only go as low as high as you go, meaning it's like a pendulum. Like it can only go so far. And
The
there is
swing.
harmony,
Yeah.
even though it's not as harmonious, but you can only go so low and so high. So if you're going low, you're most likely going high. You just don't realize it because
Mm.
you're moving, you're happy, you're socializing. Those are traits that society admires. So it's still unhealthy though, is what I'm trying to bring people's awareness to, is that there is a good balance in between where we don't want to go down, we don't want to go too high, but we do want to fluctuate throughout the year. We want to ride the wave. We want to have some fun when we can. We want to be introspective when we can. We want to get into that energy, but we want it to look like the yin yang. Remember, it's a harmonious curve. We don't
Find
want it
that
to look like the
balance.
stock market, which that
Yeah.
is what it looks like. When you ask me, how does that look like? If you see your energy going up and down like the stock market, that's what it looks like when you're in misalignment.
hmm Yeah, definitely want to find that balance and go with the flow. What's one powerful shift someone can make today to start feeling more energized and in sync with the current season?
Well, if I was just to give you a little game plan here, is just look at the sunset and understand if you're going to be gaining time for the next 6 months, which most likely is going to be that way. And then also understand when you're going to start losing time so that you can be in symphony with the sunset. Once the sunset happens, avoid all lighting. I mean, I go to the extreme of having a red light bulb here and there in my kids' room, and it just helps
Yeah,
us
me
going to
too.
sleep earlier in a more
I've got
natural manner.
those LED strip lights, and so at
Well,
night
I
I
just
put
go with a
the
light
red
bulb.
light on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anything that is red, because the issue is that today's LED lights are full of blue light. And blue
Yeah.
light is what the sun naturally produces around not noontime, but around the meridian of
hmm
the day. So I go through an exercise in my coaching program where I just give somebody a spreadsheet, give them a website, and then they can just look and plug information so they can see the variations. So we include the sunrise, the meridian, the sunset, the length of the day, and the time of the sun. Well, yeah, those three. And pay attention to that. Try not to turn all your lights on. I mean, the list can get very, very detailed. Like, put your phone in another room because electromagnetic frequencies. I'm not want to go there because I
Yeah.
just want to give the practical, most up to the spot. Trying to stay away from blue light. It makes your brain think is noon, and it
hmm
makes your brain produce cortisol to be alert because that's what we do during the
Mm,
day, and it prevents your brain from producing melatonin. So then you don't
yeah.
feel sleepy, then you're wired, and then
Yeah.
you're having
Melatonin is what helps you fall asleep naturally, right?
correct. So then that when you're under a lot of blue light, that is that's disrupted. That's called
hmm
circadian rhythm disruption.
Yeah.
So that can be a very practical way to be able to have a better sleep, as we discussed. Sleep, number one behavior. So my method, we help people align with sleep, exercise, nutrition, outdoor connection, human relationships, and novelty. Those are from a
hmm
neurological perspective, and in that order. I mean, well, maybe novelty can be a little higher. Novelty is great for graceful aging and neuroplasticity, but sleeping is number one. So that will get you ahead of the game, and just realize as the transition goes through the year that you might want to have at least two routines throughout the year, one for the summer, one for the winter. I take it a little farther because I bring in the differences between summer and winter, sorry, between fall and winter from a social dynamic perspective. But those are just weekly behaviors that you can modify. If you pay
Yeah.
attention to having two routines during the year, you are already ahead of the pack. And it's just to realize in the morning, you might put the workouts some time of the year. You take that off and put it in the afternoon. Just those two are going to make your day flow a lot better. And again, if you're feeling a little misaligned, it's not your fault. Just look around.
Yeah.
Look what's going on. Is your routine disrupting your natural rhythm? That should be the
hmm
question.
Yeah. Yeah. Sticking with that natural rhythm, I think, can really go a long way in helping us, overcome this seasonal, affective disorder. My wife and I have a constant battle with the lighting at night. I always like to turn the overhead lights off and
Yeah.
just put on the incandescent lights, and it's I tell her it's helps me fall asleep, and she's always like, I can't see, it's too dark. And of course, she's got trouble sleeping at night. And I'm like, it's because you got all the bright lights on. And, in the morning, you got to go out and see the sun so you can like get back in
Yeah.
that natural rhythm. And it's, hopefully one day it'll click. But,
Well, that's
not
where
yet.
like just having like a red light, because it's a little, it has a lot less blue light into it, which is kind of the red light is what we get in the sunset and the sunrise. So
Yeah.
it's a little less damaging for the person trying to go to sleep, and it still allows people to see a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, going outside, getting the sun. Again, amazing advice. Um, it's just not practical sometimes during certain times of the year, during certain locations. So
Yeah.
I just want to bring that up. Like that truly is one of the best ways for you to enter into circadian alignment is to wake up, go outside, get the sun on your face for 10 minutes. It resets, it starts your circadian rhythm, and it tells your rhythm, hey, it's morning time. But the reality is that a lot of times in the winter time, we wake up before the sunrise. The
Mm-hmm.
sun, like the amount of sun that we have is just limited. I think where I live is around 8 hours. And a lot of those 8 hours is cloudy. I know that even if you get cloudy days, you still get some benefit out of it. But you have to add on top of that that sometimes it's windy and it's cold and it's wet. And it's just not as convenient as just, opening your door, going in the sand in the beach and opening your your arms and getting that sunlight come through. So again, understanding the seasonality and understanding that's great advice, but it's not feasible during certain times of the year for
Mm-hmm.
a big amount of the population. So what can we do? Instead of that, there's option B, which is if you have a light therapy box, just a little light that gives you 10,000 lux. You can find them everywhere. Just get in front of it while you're making your coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you don't have that light. Well, it might not be as scientifically proven, but it does work to a degree, which is that you start all the lights in your house. Like when you wake up, is the opposite than when you go to sleep, which is you want to
Mm-hmm.
keep all your lights off in the morning. Actually, just turn them on because that will signal your brain that you're awake. So again, the same advice needs to be put into context with the season
Mm-hmm.
so that we can actually execute it. Like it has to be convenient. And another one would be, grounding. Like I'm sure that, that most people hearing this understand the benefits of grounding and being barefoot on the air. There's many ways to do it, but that's the simplest one, right? Like just be barefoot, go into the air. You're gonna again winter time. What happens in the winter time? It's cold outside.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not that we want to be living in this synthetic world, but one of the ways to adopt that beneficial behavior is having a grounding mat in the winter.
Mm.
So, there are ways to do it the right way. And my point is by understanding that that is being taken away, then we can start bringing into that season the things that are beneficial and good for us so that we can be in alignment during that season as well. Because what normally happens is that you don't get the morning light. You pretty much just don't get any light sometimes. Like it's just cloudy
Yeah.
and like you just don't get much. You spend all
Mm-hmm.
day indoors. You go through months of no grounding. Think about this. Like you go through months using shoes going outside. You are not grounding yourself to it. Very
Mm-hmm.
few people go and hug a tree. Like it just doesn't happen that often. So
Yeah.
think about your life and the way you feel without those two. It's a very different environment. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
very different environment. So we just kind of want to be aware and make conscious decisions to enhance our environment during that time of the year. And those are two little tips there that are like wintertime tips on how, but it's pretty much the philosophy of how we can actually take control of our environment and by understanding the seasonality to it.
Definitely. Yeah. What's one question that you wish people would ask you more?
Uh, I always go back to like, if I ask somebody, like somebody asks a question, when's the right time to go to sleep? I like to always say, it depends of the season.
Yeah.
It's like it depends on the season. Give
Definitely.
me some context. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes back to everything, in a biohack infested online world nowadays. I say, they're all beneficial. Number one is depends on who you are, because you can do a lot more damage. For example, a cold plunge in the morning for somebody that gets stuck on stress mode for too long, it becomes chronic stress. So it depends on who you are. That's number one. But then it also depends on the season. So a great question would be anything related to a biohack or to a routine, and that I can bring perspective into. It depends on the season because basically what we have been talking about this whole podcast
Hmm.
is a different environment, completely different environment. Somebody might be making a video about this is the right thing to do, this is my routine, and that person might be in Miami, Florida, whatever time of the year, it doesn't matter. It might be there, right? Then somebody is looking at that video in Canada in the middle of the winter and might think, well, this guy is famous, this guy is successful. Obviously, he has a great intention, like you can tell, right? Like he's doing it from his heart, he's giving me advice. But again, who you are, your geographic location, and the time of the year, that's what matters the most.
Definitely. Those are all great tips. So if people want to work with you, where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and we have our school group is where the magic happens, perhaps.
Hmm.
It's a group coaching platform where you enter into our method, the seasonal harmony method, and the epigenetic seasonal method programming. So essentially, we get access to an application where you can plug in your data. I mean, I'm
Mm.
talking about the size of your crane, your jaw, your eye colors, your skin color, the amount of hair you have gray hairs, your wrist, your elbow, your chest, your hips. I'm talking, and then medical information, so that the app can take that and realize who are you genetically
Wow.
and where are you right now. So then through the app and through our community, we're able to guide you so that you can
Mm.
become the best version of yourself. Again, your epigenetics. Why? Because now we know who you are. Now we know the environment, and we bring that expertise of the environment. That's a lot of the magic that happens in the group is that, hey guys, this is coming up. We're gonna be heading into the spring. We're gonna be heading into daylight savings time. Hey, we're in the summer. This is how
Hmm.
you can expect your body to react to the environment. So we will guide you. This is something that happens on the daily basis, not the day, no, weekly basis, but this is something that happens real life, real time so that we can make you aware of what's heading your way and how to adjust. And what you end up with is a guide of what is your ideal routine. That is like the
Hmm.
deliverable. Is what you want to know is what is my ideal routine this season to enter into the flow. So what we know is that essentially what we now call the flow, there's a lot to do with ultradian rhythms. There's a lot to do with chronobiology, circadian rhythms. There's a lot to do with many different disciplines, but essentially it comes down to understand the best mix between periods of rest and stress. When we
Mm.
can get that ideal mix throughout your day, then you're going to perform your best. And again, the tricky thing is that it changes a little bit because the environment changes and you might
Yeah.
feel that. So we have to guide you through that. But the idea is that you are in the flow every single season of the year.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I mean that's really impactful. And so it's the seasonal movement on social media, Instagram and the like.
Yeah, the seasonal movement dash Ruben Gomez. That's how I'm on Facebook. And then, but if you type the seasonal movement, we will pop. And then on the school community, it's a seasonal movement as well. But if you just look down, we'll be providing all those links for you, so you can just click there and go directly there.
We definitely will. Awesome. I like to wrap up the show with a segment that we call the final dose. And so it works like this. We'll spin a wheel that'll select a word or phrase at random, and then if you would share a story or maybe the first thought that comes to mind. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, let me share my screen so we can all see the wheel. And can you see it there?
Yeah, I see it.
All right, great. Well, I'll hit that button and we'll see what we get. Challenge, challenged wisdom. What's you have a story or first thought about maybe it's the time where your wisdom was challenged?
Huh. Okay, so my wisdom being challenged. Okay, perfect. So I tend to grind my way to success. At least that was me, um, 10, 5 years ago, and even before then. I would grind my way through it until I hit the wall, the
Yeah.
seasonal wall. Like I truly hit it. Like I'm like, what's going on?
Mm,
Nothing will work. And that's when now I can tell you is that it's not about pushing, it's about flowing through it, like understanding which river you're navigating and
yeah.
then just flowing with the current. Because when I was fighting it and I was swimming against the current with, you wake up at this time, you do this, without really realizing that that changes,
Mm-hmm.
then I was just pushing, I was just swimming against the current. So that's when my wisdom got challenged over 10 years ago. And now this is a culmination of it, is realizing, well, this is a river. This is how the river currents work. Just flow with it, like let yourself go with the flow. I think that has been the biggest lesson from any perspective that I had gotten over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like going with the flow versus trying to swim upriver can really make it that much easier to find success and feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you do that, like things come easier. I like to say, we can achieve more with less effort. It's not just that success comes in one area of your life. When you're pushing, you tend to push in perhaps business or one area specifically. But when you get in the flow, then you also start paying attention to your nutrition, to your exercise, to your wellness routine, to your mental health, to your spiritual health, and you start realizing over time that it, it might seem like a slower progress, but it actually compounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a lot farther with a lot less effort, if that makes any sense. It's like compound interest. It just grows faster and it just doesn't stop.
Definitely. Yeah, when you're working at your highest level, I think that really can help you be more successful without, the extra effort of just grinding and grinding till you hit that wall, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ruben, for sharing your time and helping us cut through the bullshit today.
No bullshit. Thank you so much, Ocean, for having me over. I appreciate it.
You bet.